It was the type of love story that the whole town talked about. Marcus Thompson, a 73-year-old wealthy widower with a life full of stories and riches, had met Emily Carter, a 21-year-old beauty with bright eyes and a captivating smile, at a charity gala. The way he looked at her, almost in awe, made it clear he was enchanted from the very first moment. Emily, on the other hand, had always been a dreamer, someone who longed for a life of excitement and luxury. When Marcus looked at her, he didn't see a young woman eager to explore life. He saw a future, and he was determined to build that future with her. They had met, and it had felt like fate. Their whirlwind romance was nothing short of scandalous in the eyes of Emily's family and friends. No one understood why she would choose someone so much older than her. Rumors swirled through the small town like wildfire, and the whispers only intensified when, just a month after they met, Emily announced she was pregnant. The news hit like a bombshell, and many were left in disbelief. Emily's mother was especially shocked, suspecting her daughter had married Marcus for his wealth, something that no one had dared to speak about openly, but the whole town had wondered about privately. After all, Marcus's estate was worth millions, but Emily, with her bright eyes and carefully rehearsed smile, reassured everyone that she was in love. "Love doesn't have an age," she said, her voice full of conviction. She promised to build a family with Marcus, and to everyone's surprise, they got married in an extravagant ceremony just a few months later. Despite the murmurs and suspicions of the townspeople, Emily and Marcus settled into their life together. At least, that's what everyone believed. Marcus doted on her, showering her with affection and gifts. The media dubbed them the age of love couple, with Emily frequently posting pictures of herself and Marcus looking happy, radiant, and seemingly perfect. But things were not as they seemed. 3 years after their marriage, something began to change. Marcus, once a robust man full of life and energy, started showing signs of aging more quickly than anyone anticipated. His health, which had been stable, began to deteriorate. He needed frequent medical attention, and his once vibrant presence now seemed frail. Emily, on the other hand, began to retreat into herself. Her once glowing smile became more forced, her eyes less bright. The life she had once dreamed of, full of wealth, luxury, and adoration, had started to feel like a gilded cage. Emily was beginning to realize that the life she had chosen wasn't the one she wanted. The age gap between her and Marcus, which once seemed inconsequential, had now become a glaring problem. As Marcus became more dependent on her, the weight of his illness and her responsibilities began to take its toll on Emily. What had once seemed like a fairy tale began to feel more like a prison. The cracks in their relationship were starting to show, and it was no longer just Marcus's health that weighed heavily on her. Emily found herself trapped in a marriage that, on the surface, was everything she had wanted, but underneath felt suffocating. The lavish lifestyle, the attention, and the comfort of wealth had lost their luster. She had married Marcus for reasons that she now realized were shallow and short-sighted. She had convinced herself that she loved him, but love was not enough to fill the emptiness she felt inside. As Marcus's condition worsened, Emily began to consider what she would do if something happened to him. The thought of being a widow at such a young age terrified her, but the thought of being married to someone whose health was deteriorating every day was no less frightening. Her dreams of a different life, one filled with adventure, youth, and passion, began to creep into her mind more and more. She felt a gnawing sense of guilt. How could she leave him now? He was so vulnerable, so dependent on her, and yet, the longer she stayed, the more she realized how much she regretted the choice she had made. But Emily wasn't the only one with secrets in the quiet corners of their home. A different side of Emily emerged. Beneath the polished image of the perfect wife and mother, Emily had begun to make secret plans. The days she spent with Marcus, doting on him, were less about love and more about preparing herself for a future without him. She began looking at properties in other cities, exploring options for a new life, one far away from Marcus and his declining health. She had never wanted to be trapped in this marriage, and the thought of freedom was becoming more and more tantalizing. It wasn't long before she began an affair with a man she had met through one of her charitable ventures. He was younger, full of life, and provided Emily with the excitement she had been craving. It started as a flirtation, but soon it became a full-blown affair. It was her escape, a way to feel alive again, to feel wanted by someone who didn't see her as a caretaker or a vessel for his legacy. But Emily's secret couldn't stay hidden forever. One fateful night, when Marcus was at his lowest point, Emily made a decision that would change everything. As she sat by his bedside, holding his hand as he slept, she felt the weight of her regrets more sharply than ever. She realized she could no longer live this double life, pretending to be the perfect wife while secretly yearning for a different future. But what she didn't know was that Marcus had been aware of her growing distance, her changing attitude. He had seen the way her eyes drifted when he spoke, the way she flinched when he touched her. And Marcus was not as weak as he appeared. The next morning, when Emily went to see Marcus, he was waiting for her with a clear look in his eyes. He knew everything he had known for months. His health had deteriorated rapidly, but his mind was still sharp. He had seen the way she had been slipping away, and though he was too proud to confront her directly, he had been preparing for the inevitable. "I knew you didn't love me, Emily," he said softly, his voice steady despite his frailty. "But I wanted you to see that you could have everything. A life of freedom, wealth, and choice. I gave you that." Emily froze, the truth hitting her like a thunderclap. She had thought she could escape without facing the consequences. But Marcus, in his wisdom, had already set the wheels in motion. He had changed his will, leaving her not just his wealth, but his legacy. But there was one condition: if she chose to leave him before his death, she would forfeit everything. It was a cruel twist of fate. Emily had wanted freedom, but now it was locked behind a door that she could not open without losing everything. In that moment, she realized the cost of her decisions. The guilt, the lies, and the pain of watching Marcus grow weaker all culminated in a stark truth: she had traded one prison for another. The life she had dreamed of, the life she had so desperately wanted, was slipping through her fingers. Emily had married Marcus for the wrong reasons, and now, 3 years later, she was paying the price, a price she could never undo. As the days passed, Emily was forced to confront a devastating truth: there was no way to fix what had been broken. She had been selfish, thinking she could have it all, without understanding the price that would come with it. The town watched as Emily and Marcus's once glamorous life began to crumble in the public eye. And in the end, Emily was left with a choice: continue living a lie or make a sacrifice that would cost her everything. But in the end, the truth came to light: love, she realized, wasn't enough when built on a foundation of lies. And in that realization, she finally understood the real cost of her choices. The end of Emily's story would be one that would be talked about for years to come. A story of a young woman who traded everything: her youth, her love, and her future, for a life that was never truly hers. Emily stood by Marcus's bedside, her heart in turmoil. His words echoed in her mind, sharp and unforgiving. "I knew you didn't love me, Emily, but I wanted you to see that you could have everything. A life of freedom, wealth, and choice. I gave you that ... double quotes asterisk." She had been prepared to escape, to flee from the suffocating walls of their marriage, but the price for doing so was more than she had anticipated. Marcus had known about her affair, her growing discontent, long before she had ever realized. His health had been failing, yes, but his mind had remained as sharp as ever. He had watched her, seen the subtle signs of rebellion, the longing in her eyes when she spoke of a world beyond their gilded cage. And now, the consequences of her choices were closing in on her. The mansion they had built together, the wealth, the luxurious life that had once seemed so alluring, were all now tainted with guilt. Emily's face, once radiant with the glow of youthful dreams, now seemed hollow, as if the weight of her decisions had already started to etch lines into her soul. She was trapped between two worlds, the life she had once longed for and the one she had so carelessly abandoned. Marcus's breathing grew shallow, but his eyes remained fixed on hers, almost as if he were daring her to make her next move. "You're not going anywhere, Emily," he said, his voice a frail whisper, yet the authority was still there. "I've made sure of that." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought Marcus was weak, a mere shadow of the man who had once swept her off her feet with promises of love and wealth. But he was far from powerless. He had crafted his final act, a web of legalities that would keep her bound to him, even in death. If she left him, everything would be forfeited: the mansion, the fortune, and the life of luxury she had come to take for granted. The affair with the younger man, once a desperate escape from her reality, now seemed trivial. Marcus had already known about it, and yet he hadn't confronted her until now. It was as if he had been waiting, watching her unravel, waiting for her to reveal the truth about her heart. But the truth, Emily realized, was more than just her discontent. It was a truth she had buried deep inside her since the beginning of the marriage, the truth that she had never truly loved Marcus. She had loved the idea of him, the way he made her feel special, desired, and above all, powerful. But as the years passed, that power began to slip away from her. The life she had built with Marcus had become a trap, and now it was too late to escape. A few days later, Marcus passed away in his sleep. Emily had been by his side, but her mind had been a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: guilt, regret, fear, but most of all, she felt trapped, not in the marriage, but in the legacy Marcus had left her. When the will was read, Emily's heart pounded in her chest. Marcus had made provisions for her, just as he had promised, but they came with a price. The mansion, the millions in assets, the luxury cars, and the lavish lifestyle she had enjoyed for 3 years, it all came with conditions. If she ever remarried or left the town, she would lose it all. If she failed to meet the expectations of the trust, the fortune would be divided among various charities. Not a penny would go to her. It was a trap, a final act of control. But there was something else in the will, something Emily had not expected. A clause, buried deep within the legal jargon, stated that if she chose to remain in the marriage for 3 years after Marcus's death, the entire fortune would be hers to keep, without restriction. She would be free, but only if she fulfilled her obligations to the memory of Marcus. The reality of her situation hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. She had dreamed of freedom, of escape, but now it seemed like a distant fantasy. Emily could not leave the life she had built for herself so easily. The money, the status, the influence, it was all within her grasp, but it came at a cost. Her affair with the younger man had been her desperate attempt to break free, but now it felt like an escape that had led her further into a labyrinth from which there was no exit. She could not undo the damage, and yet she found herself standing at a crossroads. Should she honor Marcus's memory and fulfill the final years of the agreement, or should she walk away from it all, knowing the consequences would haunt her for the rest of her life? The decision weighed heavily on her shoulders, and as the days turned into weeks, Emily felt the pressure building. The town had begun to gossip again, questioning her motives and speculating on her next move. The once gilded couple's life was now a tragic story of greed, control, and heartbreak. Emily had become a symbol of everything that could go wrong when love was built on false pretenses, and she was both the victim and the perpetrator of her own undoing. Emily spent countless sleepless nights pacing the halls of the mansion, torn between the life she had built and the life she wanted to leave behind. Every room in the house whispered memories of her time with Marcus, both the good and the bad. The walls seemed to close in on her as she replayed the decisions she had made: the decision to marry Marcus, the decision to stay, the decision to betray him. She had chosen this life, and yet she was now suffocating under the weight of her own choices. One morning, as the sun rose over the vast estate, Emily found herself standing at the window, gazing out at the sprawling gardens. She thought of the younger man, the man who had awakened something in her that she thought was lost. She thought of the life she had imagined for herself, full of passion and freedom. And then she thought of Marcus, the man who had given her everything, and yet had never truly known her heart. She knew what she had to do. Emily could not stay in this cage, bound by promises made under false pretenses. She could not live a life of regret, knowing that she had betrayed her own desires and dreams. And so she made a decision that would change everything. In a final act of defiance and liberation, Emily packed her bags, leaving behind the mansion, the fortune, and the life Marcus had built for her. She did not know where she was going, but she knew she had to leave. She had to find herself, to rebuild the life she had lost, and to heal from the wounds she had inflicted on herself and others. As she walked away from the house that had once seemed so full of promise, Emily felt a sense of freedom she had not known in years. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt alive again, unburdened, unchained, and free to make her own destiny. The town would continue to talk, the rumors would swirl, but Emily had learned one invaluable lesson. True freedom comes not from wealth or power, but from the courage to live authentically, even when the world expects something else from you. And with that, she disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a life of luxury, but stepping into the unknown future she had always longed for. As the years went on, the town would still remember Emily, the young woman who had married an older man for wealth, who had lived a life of luxury, but had ultimately walked away from it all in search of something deeper. Her story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of marrying for the wrong reasons and the complexity of human desire. But Emily, wherever she was, had found something far more precious than wealth, the freedom to live her own truth, and in that she had finally escaped.